The Shepnaz podcast begins now.
You're listening to the Shepnaz podcast at Shepherd Church. Everything we do here is to help people take their next step toward Jesus. This podcast is part of that. We want to help you to engage daily with your faith, that you would grow closer to Jesus each and every day. So we're thankful for you for listening. Once again, this week, we're going to take a little bit of a break from our normal routine in podcasting so that you can kind of take a deeper look at what it looks like to live a life of gratitude and of thankfulness. And today's devotion is going to come to us from 1 Samuel in the chapter 7. This is an incredible story of God's faithfulness that you and I can, I think, gain some insight to what it looks like to remember the things that God has done, to be thankful for all that he's done. Last week, we looked in Joshua and how he set up these stones. And it seems that in the Old Testament, stones are an important way to create monuments to remember the things that God has done, or to create an altar to which we could then come and present offerings to God. Samuel is leading Israel. He's a prophet, but really acting kind of like the judges acted. So before there's a king in the land, Samuel is sort of that last judge / prophet person that God's Spirit descends upon to lead Israel. And he leads them in more ways than prophets typically do towards the end of Israel's story. He leads them like judges in that he leads them into battle, and he leads them as a governor, but he also leads them spiritually like the prophet does, and like a priest does. And so Samuel is leading Israel's army, and they are for sure going to lose this battle. The odds are against them. Israel is frightened, but God comes through like he always does. God comes through. Samuel says this. He says, "Gather all of Israel at Mizpah," which is really important. That actual place is super important for Samuel specifically. Mizpah is the place where Samuel received his call. It says this: "I will pray to the Lord on your behalf." When they gathered at Mizpah, they drew water and poured it out in the Lord's presence. They fasted that day, and then they confessed, "We've sinned against the Lord." And Samuel judged the Israelites at Mizpah. And when the Philistines heard that the Israelites had gathered there, their rulers marched up toward Israel. And when the Israelites heard about this, they were afraid because of the Philistines. The Israelites said to Samuel, "Don't stop crying out to the Lord our God for us so that he will save us from the Philistines." This is the moment they're saying, "Oh no, we're for sure going to be conquered. And our only hope is for you to continue to pray and to cry out for us." So Samuel took a young lamb and offered it, the whole burnt offering, to the Lord. And he cried out to the Lord on behalf of Israel, and the Lord answered. Samuel was offering the burnt offering as the Philistines approached to fight against Israel, but the Lord thundered loudly against the Philistines that day and threw them into such confusion that they were defeated by Israel. The men of Israel charged out of Mizpah and pursued the Philistines. And here's the important part of this story for you and for me to hear. Afterward, Samuel took a stone and he set it upright between Mizpah and Shin, and he named it Ebenezer. It means my rock of help, if you're looking at that. And he says this: "The Lord has helped us to this point." The Lord has helped us to this point. I love this story. I love that Samuel erects a monument to remember what God has done. But it wasn't just this battle that he's reminding the Israelites of. He's saying, listen, up until now, God has always come through. Up until now, God's always come through. Samuel, continuing the legacy of the leaders of Israel, of the judges, and even before that, all the way back to Abraham and Moses, saying, like, listen, until this point, God has come through. He made a covenant with our people, with our father Abraham. He made a covenant, and he's come through over and over and over again. He will not fail us. He will not let us down. He's always come through. And maybe you're looking at your life and saying, I just don't know. I promise that if you look back through the years, through the days of your life, you'll see moments where God came through. And sometimes they're big. Sometimes they're like thunderclaps that cause confusion of the enemy. Other times they're small, like a still small voice that Samuel heard when he was a boy in the temple or in the tabernacle. Like these are things, these are the moments in our life where God comes through. And like Joshua sets up those stones as reminders of God's faithfulness, that we can be thankful and grateful for all of the things he has done. This stone, this Ebenezer, this rock of help is important for you and for me to remember that I can count on God no matter what. I can always count on God to continue to be there, to do what he said he would do, because he's made a covenant. He doesn't break that covenant. He continues to come through. So as you spend this kind of Thanksgiving season, this holiday where we set aside on purpose to be thankful for what we have, do not neglect the ability to be thankful for what God has done. And to remember that because God has done it, he will continue to do it. What I love is that all it says is up to this point, God has helped. He's been there. And what he's reminding the Israelites is like, there's no reason. He's given us no reason to think that he won't continue to come through in the future. If you're listening, you're watching this, I want you to know that there's no reason to think that God won't come through. There's no reason to think that God will let us down, because he never has. He's already made a way. And so we're praying for you during Thanksgiving that you would receive that you would have the gratitude of what God has done for you, and that you would remember that there's no reason to believe that God won't continue to come through, because he always does. He always has, he always will. And maybe that's something that you could do. Last week we said for your family to gather some stones and to write the things down on them and then display them somewhere so you can remember the great things. What I'd also challenge you to do is get something a little bit bigger than a small stone. A little bit bigger. It doesn't have to be huge, but I'm talking, this is a rock, not a stone, a rock. And that you would get that and you would put that somewhere. It doesn't have to be in the house. It could be on the porch. It can be somewhere that you would see. And you would remember that up until this point, God has been there. There's no reason that he wouldn't continue to be there for you.
Our kids ministry team is busy right now planning Jingle Jam. Your kids will have a blast with fun crafts, joyful music, crazy games, and you'll get to hear a story full of hope in this incredible Christmas season. That will happen on December 2nd here in Gahanna, and then the next Saturday morning on December 9th in Johnstown at the Youth for Christ building. Pre-register as soon as you can at shepnaz.org or use the QR code on these invitations available in the lobby.
That's going to wrap it up for our episode today. Thank you for listening. We're so grateful for you in this season of Thanksgiving. We're thankful for you. We hope that it helps you. We hope that you share this with a friend. If you have any questions or comments you'd like to get a hold of us, you can. podcast@shepnaz.org. You can always find out more about what's happening at Shepherd through our website, our app, and our social media pages. Of course, we're so grateful. Please have a great Thanksgiving. Thanks for listening.
This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.